Hey guys, it's Grayson. I just previously recorded this and went on this huge ramble that I didn't intend to go on, so I had to scrap it and start over. This is the problem when you start having me talk about gender. I'm sorry that I haven't uploaded a video yet. It was Thanksgiving, Fallout's been out, and I told you last time that I'm a huge geek, so, I don't know what you expected from me. I looked at my old videos. The next two on my original playlist are my video on androgyny and my video on labels and transition, and how I was at the beginning of my journey describing myself as androgynous, feeling really hesitant about other labels because of the implications that they had, and how I was ambivalent about starting testosterone. And all of those things were real and valid at the time that I felt them, and I'm in a completely different space now, which is great. I'm much happier now than I was then. But I thought I would talk a little bit more about being agender and maybe catch up a little bit anyone who hadn't watched my last video where I talked about it more. So when I talk about my own gender, I describe my gender as, first, in the most broad sense, I am transgender, meaning that my gender is not the same as what I was assumed to be at birth. And I lived 18 years, a pretty standard women's existence. After I describe myself as trans, I then describe myself as non-binary, meaning that I am neither a man nor a woman. I do not have a gender that exists within the binary of what is socially accepted as gender. After that, I use the label of agender, meaning that I do not possess a gender. It can be confusing for some people. They think about it a little too hard. When that happens, I try to explain it to them like black and white. Black and white, depending on through which lens you are looking at it, can either be all colors or no colors, but for all intents and purposes, for most people, they consider black and white to be colors. So I try to explain my gender to people that way, in that I simply do not possess a gender, but for all intents and purposes, when I'm talking about gender, agender is the term that I use to describe it. I do not see the world as inherently possessing gender. Don't look at things and go, oh, those are ladies' things, or oh, those are men's things, or oh, these are only for genderqueer people. I don't look at things and see that, and I don't see my internal being, energy, soul, whatever, insert term here. I don't see my internal self as being gendered, as possessing a gender at all, hence why I use the term. It was a journey to get to agender, and I think a lot of what was confusing about it is I physically transitioned. Those were the things that kept me away from embracing my labels for a long time. A lot of people think that non-binary people don't physically transition in any way whatsoever, or they think that they only transition to a certain point, or that they only use low doses or topicals. There's all these stereotypes and misconceptions about being non-binary, and most people don't even have a framework for what agender is. A lot of people just don't even, they can understand genderqueer, kind of, and they can understand, bigender, gender fluid, kind of, but when you go into anything that, questions the whole system of gender, which my gender kind of does implicitly, they get a little confused, and it scrambles their brain a little bit, and so it took me, someone who possesses this gender. I feel like I'm gonna have to do that so much. For someone like me, it took even that person a really long time to get to the place with the labels. So I can't really blame people that much, which is why I try to educate as much as I do. It took me a long time because of the society that we're raised in. I inherently linked my physical aesthetics to my gender, and that led to a lot of freaking out because the math didn't work. It took me a long time to realize that just because I liked the idea of facial hair and I liked the idea of having a flat chest. Hi, Butters. Yeah, I'm making a video. I thought that I had to be a man. I thought that that made me a trans guy, and I knew that that wasn't right, because I'm just not. I don't know how else to explain it. I just don't. Hi, Butters. Do you want to say hi? This is Butters. Yeah, look. Yeah. I'm making a video. That's you. Yeah. Yeah. Every time I've used the term trans guy or F to M or any of the binary masculine labels for myself, I've always felt really, really uncomfortable with it. And I use them socially, like in hashtags and stuff, because that links me to a lot of people that share similar experiences. And I mean, I still use non-binary tags, I still use agender tags, but they don't get as much play, essentially. So I do it kind of as a strategic essentialism, I think is the fancy academic term for it. It took me a really long time to get to agender because of those linked aesthetics. Decoupling physical aesthetics from gender is essential for trans liberation, because this whole thing that we do where we look at somebody and guess their gender based on physical aesthetics is a completely fucked up thing to do. I mean, it's like looking at everybody and saying, aha, because you have weird facial hair, you are clearly a supervillain. Like, it makes no sense. And it really just hurts people. Yeah, it just hurts people. We need to get to a place where not only do non-binary people understand that, yeah, I can look the way I look and have whatever gender have, we need to get binary people, both cis and trans, to understand that they can be a woman and they can like whatever the fuck they like. And if that happens to be, you know, dresses and makeup and traditionally feminine things, that's totes okay. Live your femme dreams. But that guessing other people's genders based on those things is not helpful for anyone. It's really just laziness is what it is, because the entire thing could be solved by simply opening conversations with strangers by, hi, my name's Grayson, I'm agender, I use these pronouns, what about you? Like, it's super duper easy. But because so many people aren't used to having their gender unassumed, it's a habit that has yet to form, even among trans people, which is extra weird, because we, of all people, should be the first people behind that. So I identified as androgynous for a while, because I was concerned about the implications of trans and the implication of pretty much any other label. So I shied away from a lot of stuff. I stuck with non-binary for a long time, and then I used the traditional binary stuff because I thought maybe that was a thing that I could do, but it was kind of the same experience of when I was trying to force myself to be a woman. It worked and, like, kind of got done what needed to get done, but it didn't feel right anytime people interacted with me that way. And so I first stopped using a specific label altogether. I was just going as a non-binary transgender. It was really hard, like, for a long time. People who don't have to question their gender ever don't understand why labels are so important, which is why they're always the first to jump in with, like, oh, I don't care about labels. Labels are for cans. It's like, that's great. Like, I'm super happy that you don't have to care about labels, but for some people, like, finding that word to describe your experience and to describe the way you see the world is really helpful. Like, you have that word, it's like getting the corner piece on a puzzle. You get that word, and then you can kind of piece everything else out, because you finally understand where the picture starts. But if you don't know where the picture starts, then it's kind of like a crapshoot. You're just kind of like shoving pieces together, hoping they fit and make something look cool. So I didn't use a label for a long time. I didn't like how ambiguous genderqueer was. That didn't feel particularly helpful for me. I understand that there are a lot of people that use the label and it works great for them, and I'm super happy for them. I'm not saying it's a terrible label. I'm saying it didn't work for me. I've never been gender fluid. My gender is super duper static because it doesn't exist. Same kind of went for bigender because just neither resonated. So I had a really hard time finding a label that didn't relate at all to the binary. I'm really excited to get to my video later where I talk about being female to alien, because I feel like that's a concept that I, like, circled all the way back around to. I really like F to X that really makes me happy. Getting to the place where I can call myself agender and describe that to the extent that I am able, obviously, here on YouTube. It took a long time to get there, and it took a lot of just, like, literally just laying in bed thinking about shit. Like, I would go to bed at night and be like, I'm using these labels and they don't feel right, because you feel it when you use them. You feel whether they are accurate or not. I would just lay there thinking, like, I had no idea what the fuck I'm doing. I didn't have the framework within which agender was a possibility. I had met some people who identified as neutral or agender in that sense, but they were very specifically physically transitioning to what they considered to be a neutral body. And that's not my goal, obviously, because I have facial hair, which means I automatically get gendered as male regardless of anything else, which is stupid. But yeah, I didn't have a framework in which agender as a lack thereof instead of a neutral existed. I think what got me there, what got me to that place, was actually hanging out and talking with other non-binary people. I've met a lot of people in my role as an admin for the Facebook Transgender Alliance. I've met a lot of amazing people with such a wide variety of transition experiences, and I've met so many people that struggle with the aesthetics of passing as a cisgender person and how that impacts their lives. And meeting them and talking with them about the aesthetics of passing and how a wide swath of them didn't have a problem with their actual physical form. They had an issue with the way people treated them for having that actual physical form. You know, they were feminine identified people with facial hair who didn't matter what the fuck they did, they would get gendered as male everywhere they went, regardless of what they were wearing, and if they were wearing certain things, it then became dangerous. It was interacting with those people and talking with those people that helped me understand that physical aesthetics don't really have to have any bearing on my gender at all. You know, I can still be agender while choosing to physically transition my body in a more traditionally masculine way. I don't understand it as that. I don't understand my physicality as being masculine, but the wide majority of people do. And so it took me a long time to get to a place where I could say that and not feel... I mean, I guess on some level I will always be insecure about it because I live in a world where we are really far away from a place where the majority of people will come to understand that aesthetics and gender don't necessarily correlate. But as like an internal personal truth, I can say those things and not be insecure about it. People who don't have to search for those truths, people who don't have to question their gender, people who don't have to go through that process, don't understand how internally traumatic it is to experience it without being able to describe it. It physically hurts when you are trying to live as your authentic gender in a way that makes you feel good, that makes you feel confident, that allows other people to interact with you in the ways in which you want to be interacted with. Not being able to figure out how to make that happen is really, really painful. And a lot of it has to do with stigma, and a lot of it has to do with alienation, and it's part of the reason that over half of us have tried to commit suicide at one point or another, and that far too many of us succeed. I really worry that these well-meaning allies, they talk about how all genders are valid and how, you know, we should affirm everybody in their genders, but that labels aren't important and that we shouldn't worry about them and we're all human. I worry that those people with those bumper sticker slogans don't recognize the damage that can be mitigated by, instead of trying to tell people to not worry about labels, to rather help them find their label or help them create their label. I feel like I talked myself into a corner because I still have to come out to people pretty much constantly. I like to think that I pass as queer for the most part. Like, that's my ideal passing situation. But if we at all get to talking about gender, even just like simple shit, I usually choose to out myself as agender because, let's be honest, I'm white, I'm in a liberal area, I pass as a male for the most part. Me coming out is pretty safe. I'm pretty certain I'm not going to get harassed, especially since I don't really go out. Yay, social anxiety. I choose to do so because it's usually a teaching moment, and I can try and educate some people, or at least begin to expand their gender framework, laying the groundwork for gender revolution, where we uncouple physical aesthetics from gender. Yeah, so I choose to come out to a lot of people, but I still have to do it all the time. Pretty much anytime I meet somebody new, at some point it's gonna come up, and I'm gonna have to talk to them about it. And while I recognize my privilege in being able to do so, one, it's exhausting. Like, it's tiring to have to explain, like, a basic part of your person all the time. But it's something I do, and I'm complaining about it, but I enjoy doing so, because seeing that moment of recognition, seeing that click, that's really cool. And especially when they're people that I'm going to interact with a lot, slowly, like, watching their journey of gender comprehension is a really cool thing to see, and I really enjoy being able to do that for people. I just wish people would understand how tiresome it is to have to do it all the time. And then they don't understand why, when trans people put up with so much other shit on top of being patient and educational for their friends and family, why sometimes we have to blow off some steam and flip out a little bit and make offensive hashtags that will alienate allies. Yeah, so I've rambled for a good long time now, and I should probably end this. That is being agender, non-binary, talking about labels and aesthetics and all sorts of stuff. I don't know what next week is. I think I have a couple videos about coming out to my mom, so I'll probably talk about how awesome my family is, which will be fun and uplifting. The only downside is none of them live out here, so I can't bring any of them on. So yeah, I hopefully will get this edited, and I will see you next week.